by.
It did fly by.
2025.
Coming in hot.
Coming in so hot. It's like I feel ready, you know, like with every year that goes by, just the preparation. I mean, is that how you feel too?
Always. But it's like so much happens in the span of a year. It's kind of like, it's a little mind-blowing, because then you're going into a new year, so many things have transpired, and it's like you feel this culmination from all the change and all the progress, and then you're going into a new year and you're like, even more is possible.
Yeah. The possibilities for me kind of get more possible when I start losing the judgment of myself. Like, I don't give a fuck about what people think.
Okay.
In like a healthy way that's gonna make me not roadblock myself.
Right. Yeah, you have to, man. How does that manifest for you?
It's like, I like to be usually pretty refined in what I present to the world. In terms of content, in terms of like whatever, products, music, offerings.
We're presenting a lot.
Yeah, but like the people that I've learned from and the people that I take inspiration from, the more I resonate with who and what they are, the more I want to see the less refined, the actual just like more.
Yes, I think that's the one thing that makes us different. I'm a little bit more off the cuff. Like, you know, I have a certain level of refinement, but I'm also just like, this is what it is. You know what I mean?
And that's great.
Like, I like okay, there is something to be said about refining your presentation, having the presentation, but then there's also something to be said about, you know, not trying too hard, not trying to look good. You know, there's a really big thing. A lot of people hold themselves back because they're busy trying to look good, instead of just being about it. What are you about? What are you doing? Like, what do you stand for? What's your philosophy? What are you doing with it? Who are you in the real world? And what are you doing in your life?
Have you always been that way?
Well, no, that's something that I've always developed through, like, I've been investing in myself in personal development courses and programs and workshops, coaching, whatever, for the last 20 years. So it's something that I've developed. And so where I lose out, kind of my weak point, is in that, because I've been through the period of time where I was trying too hard to craft that persona, to try to craft, the facade, and everyone can feel it. It's fake. You know, there's like even the smallest element of fakeness. It's like, now what you call refined, there's fakeness and then there's refinement. So the fakeness is like where you're trying to put up, you're trying to project something that isn't there, but the refinement is improving what is there and being able to deliver it properly. And so they're kind of two different things. Right. And so what the work has done, like being in coaching and self-development, what that's done for me is just being able to not the facade, but refine the authenticity and just be able to flip it on and deliver whatever it is.
So you said you have 20 years basically investing in yourself.
Yeah.
What has it been, since it wasn't always this way for you, to drop as much raw and real content? What was it for you along those 20 years where you're like, this decision or investment I just made me move. It just made me like not see things in a way where I'm still roadblocking myself.
Well, I roadblocked myself for a long time, being that I didn't deliver a lot of content. So I started a podcast, and way back in 2016, like before everybody had a podcast.
Was that the one that I heard that I love?
Probably. Yeah, it was old school.
Well, you were doing vertical reels?
No, this was way before that.
I don't think I heard it.
I started doing some reels, a few years back, but I had a podcast that I started in 2014. I actually started before then. It's called Millionaire Life Coaching, because I was, it was all about coaching, but it was, a lot of people at that time, they don't resonate with people were very triggered around money. Of course, there are people who are seeking that out, but like the majority of people, if you're trying to cast a wide net, like talking about millionaires and coaching is going to be a very, very small net.
Yeah.
So, but I interviewed Naveen Jain. He's a billionaire. I interviewed the CEO of Icelandic Glacial Water, who's worth that company's worth $100 million, and he's like this like crazy entrepreneur. From
I like
Iceland.
their bottles. They're like little ridge bottles at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of cool stuff, but I was like, this was before podcasting was big. It was not video based, and I did a lot of phone calls. So the audio quality wasn't great.
You're doing phone calls?
Yeah, I was doing audio.
On a
It was
podcast?
an audio podcast.
You're having people like call in?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to see the Brandon show where people call in from.
With strategic growth experts. I still have them on my YouTube channel, Abundance Architect. If you go to
You still got the same number?
The strategic growth experts playlist has all the interviews that I did.
Okay.
So I interviewed Dr. John DeMartini, Naveen Jain. I had a lot of really cool interviews.
Okay.
But I never had my own platform. Like back in the day, it was Jet Set. I wanted to like kind of merge what I was doing with Jet Set, but it just didn't come together that way. And now that we're doing Legendary Life Media, it's coming together in a much more refined way. And that's where, like what you're saying, there is a certain level of refinement. Like, but preparation is not my strong suit. So preparation and planning is something that I'm not great at. I'm very spontaneous.
Right.
So one thing that I lack is that, the refinement to the point where I'm like in a space to deliver a presentation. I'm more so just like, hey, I have this inspiration, like my hair could be
this
messy.
energy.
Yeah, and I just need to get it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, the human design is helpful to realize.
It's interesting stuff, man.
The generator.
Yeah,
energy.
I don't know a whole lot about it, but Jeremy Wilson turned me on to that a few years back. He was like, yeah, you're a manifesting generator. Gave me the high level what it means, but I don't know much about it, to be honest.
Yeah, if you guys don't know much about your human design, just go check it out. It's usually the second thing in the Google search. It's the Jovian Archive. And then, yeah, the best thing to do is honestly pay somebody to give you a reading, because when I first paid for a reading, they told me this is a 3-year experiment.
Wow.
Where everybody who first comes onto the information, like trying to understand your chart and a few basic things on you'll get a reading, you'll be like, oh, this makes sense. This is why I've always been this way. It finally makes sense. But now working with a couple positive constraints on what you should do in certain situations, do that for 3 years. And then you're ready to go to the next level. Then you're ready to dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it's super interesting because it's like, again, I don't know, it's like I take everything with a grain of salt, but you look at human design and it's like this interesting mix of astrology and which chakras and chakra centers are open at your time of birth, and then they have these different personality types, and it it was a little too complex for me when I first looked at it, but the more that time went on, I was like, oh, this starts to make a lot of sense. Generators versus manifesting generators and all that.
And the reason I bring it up is in business. See, I know you, but when you're saying, I'm off the cuff and I'm go, I'm like, that's classic generator right there. That's where me or Michael or somebody who's a projector comes in, and it's like that harmony is perfect, because now we're guiding the proper preparation. We're putting in the certain things that can actually guide you to do something that we can't do on our own. Right.
Yeah. And then you also challenged me to refine the things that I really need to refine. So it's you can't just be off the cuff and have and maintain your quality, without having some level of refinement. So it's been a really good blend.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, going into 2025, what's actually on your heart and mind is Brandon goals? This is just for me, this is what I'm doing and what I know I got to, a couple key words maybe.
I like refinement because it's been a lot of expansion, but refinement is really critical. So it's you can expand, but you have to expand within your own framework, and then you have to make sure that things keep working. So sometimes the expansion challenges old frameworks.
Yeah.
So when you expand, your frameworks are challenged, and now you have to reorganize your framework, right? Whether it's, it's kind of, so I have this idea of like a mental schema or a framework of thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have the same thing in business too, right? Like you have your standard operating procedure, but if you expand your business, then certain things are going to change, and now you have to change your operating basis. You have to actually go and change, like, hey, this is what we were doing before. Now we've expanded. This is no longer working. We have to change this boundary or this procedure, right? So that expansion, part of what comes with expansion is that change or elevation in your refinement, right? So there's refinement, but then there's also refinement is change. But the completion side of the refinement is actually the implementation or the adaptation part of that change. So now you've refined and you've changed, but now you have to adapt to that change, which means that you have to adapt your old parts of the business to the new parts.
It's interesting, challenging the nature, because it created the certain SOPs and the ways of operating more, I guess you could say, naturally. Like that's how things ended up for a reason.
Right.
And now with refinement, it's that little test of that variation between those thresholds. Oh, okay, well, I kind of want to do it this way. So, I can't do it that way. I got to kind of dial it in.
Yeah.
That's definitely a cool process of sort of that inner alchemy that we all have to go through on our journey. Like when we first started talking, and I'm saying, I just feel so ready. It's 2025. What I'm really feeling is I'm feeling prepared in a way that, like, so much like you said, you've had 20 years of experience of data gathering, of self, of the world, and now refinement for all of us and everything we do is so key, because to me it's just more confidence of like, this is how I'm meant to proceed. This is how I'm meant to help people create certain, benefits to the world. So that's definitely how I'm feeling. So going back to you got refinement. Anything else on 2025?
Well, one thing that I'll say is that, like, kind of what you're saying is the integration piece. So one of the things that makes self-help such an interesting arena is that there's so much information and there's a lot of ideas. But where most people struggle when it comes to self-help is integration. Because integrating those ideas into your life, a lot of people will see things and hear things and like think about them and analyze what they're doing and think that they're going to head in the right direction, but actually physically integrating those changes into your being, into your life, into your standard operating basis, whatever it is, like that's a different skill set.
I started to think about the levels of accountability. Like you could pay for the information, but then there's like a done with you versus a done for you. And in a way, even a done for you type of situation, it gets things going faster, maybe in your business, but it kind of leaves you vulnerable because now you don't know how it was done.
Hold on. You gotta get that out of the way.
You're good.
You're burning the copal over here. It's fucking smoking us out. So you were saying even the done for you?
Yeah, well, as you're talking about implementing new changes, that's really what we all have to do, I think, on an individual level, but also collective. If you're working with a business partners, is like this training, this in-between, where it's like you're on a becoming journey. And everybody, especially in business, it's so valuable, I feel like, for people to know how to do that next level of whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. And that's where, like, sometimes I would love to have something done for me, but if I can't learn or at least understand enough to make even the hires or even to find the people to fill those roles, that's also just how my brain works as a projector, as Dan, is being able to see the whole picture, not needing to be an expert in all things, but just knowing how the whole thing works. Because if I don't know how the whole thing works, I don't know anything. I'm not a help to anything at all.
So a couple things. The first thing is when you mentioned the done for you, this is a fallacy. If you buy a program, a coaching thing, or whatever it is, and it's done for you, you're wasting your money.
You can't buy life done for you.
You cannot pay someone to do anything for you. This is the number one thing. This
is self-help.
Right, and this is why the get-rich-quick schemes and everything is it's so palpable for someone who's desiring change, right? It's just I
think the closest real thing, tell me what you think, is a done-for-you business is like a franchise.
Yeah, and even then, you still got to do the work. So it's somebody who's looking to avoid the work that's paying to buy a business where they have to do the work is going to be sadly mistaken and disappointed, and probably. There's a high potential for failure.
There's a huge, it's really interesting what we're talking around here and getting at. I'm showing the parallels in different industries. For example, in fitness, if you want to lose 100 pounds, I could give you a done for you. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to eat, down to the exact ounce. And physically, you can't fail. But there's steps along the way where you constantly have to bridge that gap to go for that walk, or make this way, or not put this on the food.
Right. You can't do it. You can't do it for me. You can't do it for the person. Right.
Yeah.
So there is there's an aspect of coaching that works, and that is allowing a person through the process. See, this is what really. Actually, funny enough, 20 years ago, the first thing I ever did was a coaching certification. Mm-hmm. It was through this company called IPEC, and it's still to this day, it was one of the best programs, hands down, that I've ever done. I was 21 years old and getting certified as a life coach, which is kind of a joke to me, right? So how can a 21-year-old know shit about life? They don't know anything. Huh. But the program itself set me up for success. It really gave me the framework of what it truly means to be a coach, how to really analyze and look at limiting beliefs, and how to understand language and what we're telling ourselves. And a really key component that I learned about coaching there is it's all about helping somebody else. Coaching inherently as if you're talking about coaching under the ICF, International Coaching Federation, which is true coaching, this is about helping somebody discover their own answers. Right? And then what I found over the years is that the coaching industry has adopted it as this person telling you what to do. And that's not what coaching is. So true coaching helps somebody discover for themselves the answers to their own shortcomings. Right?
It reminds me of true selling.
Right.
Now. Like Jeremy Miner's NEPQ 3.0. He's a top sales training guy, but he's constantly teaching you how to make it the client's idea to be the solution, and how much more powerful that is at that point where they can speak that into existence. And then a huge part of his program is once they kind of say okay, yeah, I think this could help me, and what's the next step of that? Or I really want to do this because I want to solve this, and this. And he's well, do you think that this could be the answer for you? And the client's well, yeah. And then he always teaches you to say, okay, well, but why though? Genuinely, trying to get them to really anchor that in and make it their own idea. And it relates.
Well, that's a little bit different. The reason is you're kind of talking about inception. That's a reverse psychology. It's a little bit of a manipulation tactic. When I talk about coaching, it's helping somebody identify their own limiting beliefs, their own, you already know what you need to do, but sometimes you have not brought it up to your conscious awareness. So a true coach is somebody who's going to take those subconscious blocks, the beliefs, all the things that are really there, and help you really confront them, lift them up to your conscious awareness so that you can handle them.
Nice.
When you cross that barrier into sales, there's a lot of really interesting things that happen.
How is that different though in sales? If somebody comes up with an idea of themselves,
how it's different is that you're using value linking to manipulate somebody to purchase something from you. So, and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad.
Linking?
So value linking is like figuring out what somebody values and then linking that value to your product as the solution to get the sale. Whether or not, see, the problem with that is that whether or not your product can actually provide that value in exchange. A lot of times it can't.
That needs to be done in the discovery phase and things
Right.
like that first. Yeah.
But that's the sales industry, right? So there's a lot of manipulation tactics and really bizarre things that salespeople will do to get a sale, whether or not they can actually deliver on it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different, like,
I guess
that's the dark side of sales.
I guess I'm such a sincere salesperson that it would have to
Right.
qualify with the questions first to know that this is actually something that can help.
Yeah.
And then, having it be their idea, and then also them solidifying why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's similar. It's similar,
like,
right?
Like for me, I don't want somebody in buying something from me or being in my coaching that can actually say, I want to be in this and here's why.
Of course.
Because if you make that sale and it's like they're kind of in and out the whole time, they're just going to be a problem, and then you're reselling them. Yeah,
I mean, I've learned a lot from just general business, like especially Airbnbs, like dealing with people, like who's going to be a problem.
You've dealt with a lot of shit in Airbnb.
All sorts of stuff, man.
Has that been your most like irritating business, dealing with people?
Not at all. Airbnbs are great. I have a good manager. I've only had a few problems out of like thousands of stays. Oh. Real estate in general, you will learn. So real estate's the backbone of all business. And that's the thing. It's like, because no matter, historically speaking, now things have changed a little bit with the internet. But so, internet, we have digital real estate. But, a lot of physical businesses, they still require real estate, a restaurant, I don't know what other kinds of like physical business you can think of, a laundromat, whatever. It requires real estate, and the business has to run on top of the real estate.
What's the most secure investment?
There's no such thing as a secure investment.
Well, if you had to pick,
it's a trick question because,
But isn't that the?
I'll give you the answer.
Okay, go.
Here, the answer is the most secure investment is investing in yourself. Because, and that's why I've done it for 20 years. Because no matter what happens outside, being able to develop skill sets, being able to develop relationships, being able to help yourself emotionally when you're in a bad state of mind, being able to be creative and create new. There's no substitute for investing in yourself. There's none.
That's a great answer. I'm sure we'll come back to that. But in terms of if you had to invest for like an ROI in something other than yourself, isn't that the question that everybody with money or is trying to manage money is trying to figure out? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, to start a fund or something like that, you have to have some proprietary strategy investing in something to produce an ROI, whether it's a brand or a restaurant or real estate or stock options, whatever it is. You have to produce so much ROI.
Yeah.
What's a great way to start getting into investing? House hacking is phenomenal.
House hacking. Okay.
Buy a duplex or a triplex.
Real estate is the backbone of all business.
Real estate's the backbone of all business because if you learn real estate, you learn, revenue, cash flow, all the core tenets of real estate and real estate investing. Now you understand the core of finance, which is critical for business, right? The thing with a business is now the business has to go produce a profit on top of the real estate, right? Because what do those businesses all have to do?
It's honestly more complex.
Of course, because what do they all have to do?
Sell their goods and services
to
consumers,
and in order to pay rent
for the real estate.
In order to pay rent.
Yeah.
Right?
Really interesting. Yeah, because with real estate, you can also understand contracts. You can also understand ROI.
It covers everything.
Yeah, it really does.
Yep. Now, it doesn't cover, specialized businesses. Like a restaurant's a perfect example. Restaurants have the highest failure rate of all businesses.
Isn't there the average return in hospitality, like the lowest of all, like 15%?
It's pretty low for the majority, but properly done, it can be exceptionally high.
Okay.
Right? But that's true with all business. If you do something exceptionally, it's exceptional.
Right.
Right? But like an average mom and pop like restaurant, right? Like you know, without good processes, without the best margins, like they struggle.
I've heard in a highly viewed YouTube video that the average rate of like a coffee shop or any really any restaurant in hospitality, but they were talking about coffee shops specifically, is anywhere from 10 to 15% profit margin is what the average coffee shop is bringing in.
You got to sell a shitload of coffee to make rent.
I know. This makes me wonder, like.
Well, and then you look at Starbucks. Why does it cost $8 for a drink?
That'd be a great experiment. I'd be curious to go into like what's the average Starbucks ROI.
Well, you can look up their stock. Look up their stock and look at their net revenue. See, a public company, all that stuff's public. So one thing that you can do, start looking at public companies and start exploring. You know, what is their revenue? What is their net? What is their EBITDA? What is, you know, it's fascinating. You know, but yeah, physical good type companies and products typically lower margin than intangible goods, like a consulting company. You know, so there's a lot of big consulting companies that they sell projects, they sell kind of intangible services, like KPMG. They're selling tax audit services, right? They're basically arbitraging labor to get government requirements fulfilled, right? So these companies, they have to do an audit to fulfill their their requirements, and then they have to. So then they're arbitraging labor by hiring consultants. So they'll bill out at $100 an hour, and then the consultant gets paid $70 an hour. The consulting company gets that 30% margin. It's a high margin.
That's why I think the best starting off business for anyone to get into, if they know anything about anything, which everybody knows something about something, is coaching.
Coaching or consulting.
Because you can charge whatever people will pay, and you can put a high valuation on it, especially if you deliver on it and get more results and scale it.
Right.
Don't need to buy real estate for that, but you can buy real estate with the profits.
Right. Yeah, I mean, historically, real estate is more of a store of value. So like, wealthy people who come into money, they get into real estate because they need somewhere to put the money. And that's where they start, they start investing in higher end properties, and that becomes a store of value.
I thought you were going to say real estate when I asked you the question, what's the most secure investment?
Right.
I thought you were going to say real estate, but you didn't.
Well, that's what you would expect me to say, right? But I would say real estate is second to investing in yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you don't invest in yourself, how are you even going to manage the investment? The average person, they come across the smallest inconvenience and want to quit.
As Jay-Z says, I'm a businessman. He's a business.
Oh, he says, I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman.
100%. Everything's a write-off.
Everything's a write-off, man. And this is the first thing that we learn in real estate investing is that, everybody should have a small business. No matter what it is, start a small business so you can start learning the process of your taxes, your write-offs, your expenses. And it's a great way, especially in real estate, it's great because it's like we would hey, I want to go on a trip. Let's go on a trip and look at some real estate. Now it's a write-off.
There you go.
And of course you have to make money in order to write off the taxes, right? So
we all have a personal EIN, called a social security number. So in a way, we all kind of are businesses.
You are. Well, yeah, that's a rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down here. But yeah, basically you are.
I will. I'll go down it for you.
Go down it. You're a securitized asset. This is. I don't know if I would say it's a conspiracy, if it's fact, or if it's speculation. But it's like your birth certificate. There's these guys on the internet that'll go down the rabbit hole. Like you're a securitized asset traded on the stock exchange. Like everyone that's born is basically collateralized debt. It's. But the reality is like, okay, they say that as if it's a bad thing. But it's like, yeah, okay. You're collateralized as debt against the system, but you're also a beneficiary of the system. which people don't understand. Like the system that's here, especially in America, it's like, people can complain about they don't make enough money, this, that, and the other, but you have a system that pays you to live in.
You're talking about Social Security?
I'm talking about the financial system in general. The Social Security is part of the financial system. Your Social Security basically is securitized you as a corporate person within the corporation of the United States. You're securitized as against it's speculative, maybe $1 million in debt, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, over the lifetime, this person will generate $1 million in income, right? The average person will. Because it sounds like a lot, and for people who don't make a lot of money, they're thinking, that sounds like a lot. But no, calculate your salary over the next 30 or 40 years, you'll eventually make, $1 million at some point, right? So, but what I'm saying is the financial system is backed by the confidence of the people and the government. Well, what is the government? The government is the structure of society. So, you get to live in a nice house, even if you have to pay rent. You're living in a nice house. You have running water. You have, a clean, safe environment to live in, right?
Yeah.
They don't have that in Africa.
I think it's really they're creating a monitoring system for it's a personal P&L, and the taxes need to be paid.
Yeah. Let me clarify my point on Africa first, though.
Okay.
Because not obviously there is a financial system in Africa, but I mean people living out in the unbanked areas of different countries.
Unbanked areas.
If they're unbanked, right, they don't have running water. They don't have modern conveniences. Even you were talking about when you're in Mexico, you're like, I miss the modern conveniences.
Yeah, a lot of them, yeah. So
because they have a different system. Mm-hmm. And their system, and a lot of these international countries, their system, well, now it's a kind of more of a world system, but a lot of them were weighed against the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm. Understood, yeah.
But
yeah, the Social Security number thing is really just so they can collect taxes, and the people who denounce their Social Security number and become a United States national, the real reason they're doing it is to not have to pay a lot of, or really any of the taxes.
Yeah, I mean you can get it. There's a lot of reasons.
And there's ways to accomplish that same goal of not paying taxes through proper education.
Correct.
And how to write off your income.
Proper business structure.
And yeah, I think remember Trump said something about somebody was like, you don't pay taxes, and Trump was like, yeah, I don't pay taxes because I'm smart.
Yeah, it was
and
it
nobody,
was Trump and Hillary.
Yeah, nobody understood that.
Yeah, and she goes, something about billionaires not paying their fair share. And he says, I don't pay my fair share because of the legislation that you made, just like all your friends.
Yeah, and Trump was playing at a level that Hillary can obviously understand, but most of the general public didn't understand at the time, especially the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to the financial system, it's even that whole debate about which type of ism is the best ism, right? Capitalism, communism, all this stuff. It's look, at the end of the day, you have access to everything you need to survive and thrive in life. Mm-hmm. It comes down to you, right? The system that is here before you has paved the way, right? Okay, now we can get into the food system and all that. Okay, but it's you have food, you have water, you have the ability to make money, you can get a job, you can get an apartment, you can live a decent life, right? So what's the minimum that people need to live a decent life? Well, that's the minimum.
Where was the question asked? What is the best ism?
Oh, that's a big political discussion of people who are
politics
anti-capitalism
at large.
Yeah,
that's just people coming. That's being on Facebook.
Communism, socialism versus capitalism.
It's just a constant, ongoing question of what is the best ism.
Yeah, and a lot of it's driven by propaganda. At the end of the day, it's propaganda. That's why I say, look, when it comes down to it, it's a great system that we have, and so you're an inheritor or a beneficiary to the system. So yes, you can, the state national type people, they'll be like, oh, you're a collateralized debt. You need to reclaim your power and reclaim all this. Okay, I understand. Like they're upset with the government and they want to try and go a different route. That's fine. But as an inheritor of the system, you're a beneficiary of the system.
Yeah.
You're the beneficiary. You'll say, well, no, you're not. You're not the beneficiary. Whatever, these systems or these powers are the beneficiary. But the reality is, you're the one enjoying the fruits and benefits of it, right? You get to live in the nice house. You get to, you get to exist inside of that system, and go to nice restaurants and live life, and do everything that you want to do through that system.
Yeah.
And so, if you have the right view of it, the system itself is empowering. But I will say, because one of the things that I teach in a lot of the financial course, it's like the inherent nature of the system is oppressive. The inherent nature of the system is financially oppressive to the average person. But that's also on you for being average. So what is it going to take for you not to be average?
Well, it's the nature of nature in nature is oppressive to organisms.
So the
nature of the universe is a two-party system. If you look at binary code, that's what our matrix is made up of. If you look at good and evil, that's what the mythology of our mind constructs truth out of. We exist on this plane in binary existence, but of course, for those who have ventured to the higher realms, you can see everything as oneness that holds the two. But this plane of existence isn't for oneness.
Well,
this is the binary two-party plane system.
Put the polarity aside and just look at nature, like where you said light. Yeah, I used to have this conversation too about man, life would be so much easier if we didn't have all this, the complexity of the system that we're living in. We could just go live in the jungle, right? Live off the land, or even live in nature. But life in nature is not free either.
Yeah, life in nature is tough.
So talk about that. What's the oppression in nature, right? If you're in the jungle, a fucking jaguar could come up and attack you and eat you. That's oppressive.
Yeah.
That's oppressive, right?
Exactly.
That's nature.
There's no justice to be served there.
Right.
Besides, it's just there's no man-made laws. There's no man-made rules. There's nothing to protect your feelings.
Right. So there's just as much threat or more threat in nature than there is in the man-made system.
Yeah. We've created a lot of safety through our figuring out of ways to avoid the jaguar killing us. We've created proper construction, proper plumbing, things of that nature. And then we've even created laws on top of it. And we created a world where you can basically walk into a corporation and say, I'd like a job, and you whether you qualify for it or not, if you decide to be gay that day, you have a better chance of getting the job. If you decide you're trans one day, you have a better chance of getting the job. But we've created a world where
get canceled here.
Yeah, it really caters to the feelings more than
that's really where
what the jaguar thinks.
Politics really comes in to protect people who feel that they have some disadvantage, right? And that's where it becomes an interesting conversation. It's if you have a disadvantage in nature, you have a broken leg, you have a higher chance of getting eaten by the jaguar. Does God or nature put a protection in place, or do you get eaten by the jaguar? You get eaten.
You get eaten, yeah.
Right? So now we have in this modern society, it's well, sure, but this is a part of our evolution. It's we have to protect people who are weaker, who don't have the same advantage or opportunity as we have. So we have to protect them, and that's where politics fights for rights of people in this place, and this is where we
and
enact
it's wrong.
Laws, right?
It's all wrong to the level that we we put it to, and it doesn't follow in nature.
It doesn't follow nature, but you could argue whether it's right or wrong all day. But the fact is that like, that's part of being in democratic society. Even though we're a republic, part of being in democratic society is that it's that like, okay, if the majority speak and say, hey, we should protect this person or this class or whatever it is, we have to protect them because that's what the law says. That's what we've agreed upon. And so we're agreeing upon the system that gives the power to the people to go and put those things in place.
Yeah.
But to your point, it does go against nature.
Well, just like
human beings are doing a lot of things that go against nature.
Yeah, and I know where you stand politically. So it's interesting that you're playing devil's advocate. But when we talked earlier about the selling and it being like kind of a manipulation, that's all that the politics are really doing is they're convincing those that don't know any better and rallying them up around ideologies and feelings that get them to 100%. Think things are the way that they think they are.
Yes.
And I wanted to say this too. So when you're in nature and you have a broken leg and you're the one that gets eaten by the jaguar, survival of the fittest, we also see that concept in the marketplace.
Right.
So I think that governs, like there's certain kind of whatever you want to call these principles.
We can try all we want to cheat the laws of nature.
Yes.
But the laws of nature will always prevail.
They will.
They'll always prevail.
Will. And they'll prevail even against what people think feeling-wise about it.
And that's why we see such a divide and we're in such a strange time in history because what you said before, it's rallying the masses around a cause. The outcome of that is propaganda. And propaganda, which has been used
for
is
just fake.
Centuries.
It's just falseness.
It's not fake. It's the assertion that something is true on a mass scale, and it manipulates people into believing something is true.
The lie becomes the truth.
And the lie becomes the truth. And that's how, through that propaganda manipulation, you get a law passed. Now all of a sudden that's true, and it's
based off of the lie.
Right. And so the law is used to enforce truth. Whether or not it's true. The law is used to enforce reality, I should say. The law says this is reality, this is the way it is, and here's the law. It's an enforcement of reality upon the masses. And so, but what's interesting about that is exactly that. So you can create a law that enforces this reality, and it could be going totally against nature. And then what happens is, there's blowback from nature, and some crazy stuff happens, and and now everyone's like, oh my God, like what is going on in the world?
Yeah.
Well, that's what's happening. It's like somebody convinced you that we need to cheat nature in this way.
It's natural law versus legalism.
Right.
Legalism is just the man-made, which anything like
legalism is the man-made fiction
false
world.
Things could be passed as we're going to enforce these. That's legal.
Yes.
And the natural law is kind of just like God's law. It's just what will prevail.
Right. Legal. Yeah. The world of legal. Common law, maritime law, whatever you want to say, like the legal, this is a world of man-made fiction.
Dude, if there's anything I hate more, it's legalism.
Yeah.
Legalese. But it's the playing field of commerce.
It's the playing field of everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Of commerce, yes. It is commerce, yes.
Really, really interesting stuff.
But and that's interesting because now we have this world, this kind of fake imaginary world that everyone agrees is real, superimposed over the natural world. And that's the Matrix. That at the core is like the Matrix. When you hear about like people talking about this is the Matrix, well, that's really what the Matrix is. However, the Matrix becomes real through consensus and agreement. And that's where the propaganda starts to politicize things into trying to change this fictional world that we all agree is real.
Yeah.
The propaganda is there to alter the reality of that fictional world.
Definitely. And that's what I know you mean by it's true. But it takes like a false original concept and then creates it through repetition and emotion.
Well, that's what propaganda is.
Yeah.
It's repeating a message to a wide enough audience enough times to change their perception and reality.
It's like the classic obey sticker.
Right.
There's a whole brand made off of that.
Yeah. And then propaganda is interesting, right? The whole concept of propaganda. Even corporations, companies, they have to have propaganda, right?
Yeah.
The McDonald's slogan, right? The song, that's propaganda. So somebody who agrees with what they're doing and like, you know, they like McDonald's, they have some sort of like affinity with McDonald's, and then they hear that slogan or that song,
Yeah.
it becomes an agreement, and it enforces their reality of that this is good. And so that's that advertising, the world of advertising in a sense, utilizes propaganda because, yes, it shapes culture.
It really is powerful influences when it can extend out to culture. That's when you know you've like really made a successful campaign.
Yes. Well, it was like Steve Jobs when he said he's going to make a dent in the universe. He, you know, they hired the ad agency, and they really, I mean, they also had a product that was worthy of it.
Right.
But, you know, but they also sold the idea with the product that people adopted.
Did I tell you about this? So how impactful Steve Jobs was on the world, right? Everybody like has an iPhone in their hand, and how much that's changed human consciousness, like the software that we all kind of collectively think with.
Yeah. Good and bad.
Prior to Steve Jobs, one of the most impactful people in the world that had a direct impact on Steve Jobs was Albert Hoffman, who first synthesized LSD.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I know there was that stuff. If you watch the movie, Steve Jobs doing his little trips.
Yeah, doing his trips, which is like the LSD experience it completely opens the mind to the possibilities, and I would argue had a huge impact on what Steve Jobs eventually created. I think he was going to do great things regardless, but I think if there's anything to pinpoint, it would be probably his LSD experiences. That without Albert Hoffman synthesizing that, I don't know if it would have trickled down to the effect of us having our lives changed so much by the iPhone today.
Yeah.
And that's the dent in the universe, like that's still echoing as he's passed. And it's gonna still proliferate. Like everything that happens and apps that get hosted on the iPhone, and just it's gonna continue to birth itself outward.
Interesting
Stuff.
It's epic. Yeah. So what part do you think that? You know, so we're talking about nature, right? So it's like, what part does, you know, there's a lot of tribal cultures over the centuries who use, you know, substances, a wide variety, right? What part does that play in the evolution of human consciousness?
With plant medicines.
There's plant medicine, talk about cacao a lot.
Yeah,
like,
cacao. You know, these are... Oh, man.
We even have alcohol and tobacco. I mean, alcohol in Europe was a big part of the social evolution.
Yeah.
So, like, holistically looking at substances and mind-altering things that you're talking about.
Let me just say one thing that kind of really say the impact that all substances have. The world as we know it today, and I would argue that capitalism itself may not even exist, at least to the level that it is today, without coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee dramatically changed the world. I mean, we're all living on one of the most powerful, potent, addictive,
psychoactive caffeine is a psychoactive substance.
Yeah, I would actually argue that if we didn't have coffee, we would have probably some cocaine-like drink. Like Coke.
Well, we did in the 1800s, back in the 1800s,
In Peru, they chew on cocoa leaves to work, to stimulate.
What's that stuff in Asia? It's called like khat or something. It's some other leaf that they chew. It's similar to the betel nut, the betel nut, where they chew it and it gives them like this buzz. Also, what's this other stuff that we see everywhere? Kratom. It's supposedly the same thing, where it's like it enabled them to work long hours in the fields.
But so there's coffee. You know, cocaine comes from the coca leaf. But these things are having natural plant derivatives And I think it really boils down to how much food actually is information for our body and really serves a purpose to our potential. Like, there's a time for being ahead. There's a time for being behind. There's a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest. And we're supported in that through different herbs, different extracts.
Yeah. Well, I think it's super interesting you brought up coffee, because from my time in corporate America, right, it's like very interesting to see how there's this almost unspoken ritual.
Don't speak to me unless I have coffee.
Well, it's not just that. It's just like there's this unspoken like worship of this fucking bean. You know what I mean? Where it's just like everywhere I've been, they have like, you know, whether they brew it themselves or they have the little coffee grinder machines that make it. It's just like there's some weird obsession that people have.
Yep.
Even they have the worst crap too, where it's just like cheap coffee and the sugar and the powdered cream. It's just like just horrible. But you know, it's like it's still the center of it's the hub, right? Like people take their breaks, go to the coffee room and get their coffee. And
yeah, if we didn't have coffee, there wouldn't be like, hey, let's go hang out at the coffee shop. Like,
yeah. So I saw this really interesting. If you look this up, go on Google and look up spider's web caffeine. And so there was an experiment. These scientists took spiders that make a certain web, and they give them all these different substances. They give them marijuana and coffee and LSD and all these things, and like, so they give them all these substances, right?
Yeah.
And the webs are all fucked up. The
Right.
webs are all like messed up beyond belief, and caffeine was like the worst.
Really?
Yeah, and so it's interesting because, you know, if you would say caffeine is good for what benefit it has a benefit for physical exercise, right? You take caffeine, it'll give you physical exercise. But when it has the effect on your brain to think clearly, it actually completely messes up your brain's ability to cognite in an organized way. It really, because it's psychoactive, it's a stimulant, it causes your thoughts to race, it reduces the ability to actually think clearly and coherently and creatively. So, which it has the reverse effect of what you would think from some of the other substances that people use for creativity.
Very
but
true.
Similar, and so I thought it was interesting because in my time in corporate America, it's just this confused, chaotic mass of
Doing
activity and doing.
Yeah.
And nothing is organized or properly executed. It's just a mass of mess and chaos.
Right.
And it's like fueled by this drug.
Right. There's an interesting story about, I'm not sure who it was. I should figure this out, but it was one of the first like industrial jobs. Like I want to say it was Hershey's or something like Hershey's factory, where they were looking for a way to increase the profits, and there was like a group of women. Which actually reminds me, this might have been like a sewing company.
Okay.
Early, like around the Hershey era. And they were like, hey, like we got to figure out a way to increase productivity. And they asked these female sewing workers, what can we do to like increase your productivity? And they were like, oh, just give us like a tea break. Yeah, we'll come back after like 10, 15 minutes and just be recharged after a little tea break. And they started drinking coffee at the tea break and came back, they saw such an increase in the productivity.
Well, sure. Yeah, so we're in manual labor. I could see that it has that.
Yeah.
Because remember, physical activity, as I talked about, caffeine, when you're talking about mindless manual labor, it would certainly increase the speed at which you do something.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like, corporate planning and like the strategic, organization and planning, I've seen that it actually wreaks havoc.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that's very interesting as the origin of it, right? So like for manual labor, sure, stimulants would increase your productivity.
Yeah.
That's why the farm laborers in Asia use the, what's that stuff called that they sell in the vape shops? The Mengda, it's like, what the hell?
It's their version of coffee.
Kratom. The Kratom.
Kratom.
Yeah, the Kratom shit.
Kratom.
So
yeah.
I don't know. That stuff's pretty nasty. I wouldn't take it, but
yeah,
I would love to hear people's experiences of it.
But yeah, I don't know, man. This has been a good conversation. I think this could be a good place to press pause for now until next time.
Yeah, man. Great. To 2025, guys. Thanks
To
if you made it to the
2025.
end. Subscribe and follow. And more to come.
We'll see you guys in the next one.
Yep.